13, we're going to be looking at church giving trends and how those impact your parish, and how better to take advantage of what's going on in those giving trends so that you can increase the generosity among the members of your congregation. My name is Jim Murphy. I am the Managing Program Director of the Episcopal Church Foundation under our financial resources area. Many of you have already attended ECF webinars, so this is no surprise, but for those of you who have not or who are listening to this on our recording, the Episcopal Church Foundation is an independent and lay-led organization that has been around for over 70 years. We're very proud of our history. We are a lay-led organization, meaning although we very much love our clergy brethren in the Episcopal Church, our priests, our deacons, our bishops, we have no clergy on our board. We serve the entire Episcopal Church throughout the country, all of its dioceses, parishes, and other organizations. And we empower all sorts of congregations through visioning and planning, leadership development, and raising of their financial resources for ministry, focusing on the capability that comes from doing things in partnership in lay and clergy teams so that we can build even more healthy, vibrant, and vital Episcopal communities of faith. And we do that in two main ways: through our leadership resource work, in things that many of you may already be aware of, our Vital Practices website, or possibly our Vestry Resources Guide, or many of the other educational events that we focus in on. In addition, we focus on empowering and building up our Episcopal parishes and other entities through helping them raise and manage financial resources, such as in the area of capital campaigns, where we're able to help your parish in those very unique times when you're doing a capital campaign, but we can actually help you on a sliding fee scale based upon your operating budget. So we're happy to assist you in that way. ECF is also the main resource for planned giving in the Episcopal Church. Many of you have already seen my webinars on this topic. You're welcome to view them at another time on our Vital Practices website. We have a great endowment management area where we can help you to put your structure and policies in place for ensuring that you're building up trust among the members of your congregation by having in place appropriate policy and structure when it comes to endowment. We also assist you in developing your strategic resources. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Marcia Shetler, who is the Executive Director and CEO of the Ecumenical Stewardship Center. Marcia will be our main host tonight. You won't need to see me. I will be working behind the scenes, watching as all of you will type in your questions into the chat and just assisting in the background. Just a little bit about Marcia. Marcia became the Executive Director and CEO of the Ecumenical Stewardship Center in March 2011. She holds an MA in Philanthropy and Development from St. Mary's University, Minnesota, a BS in Business Administration from Indiana Wesleyan University, and a Bible certificate from Eastern Mennonite University. She formerly served as administrative staff in 2 middle judicatories of the Church of the Brethren, and most recently was Director of Communications and Public Relations for Bethany Theological Seminary in Richmond, Indiana. She has supported her spouse David in his own ministry, which includes decades of pastoral service, seminary admissions, and student development, and other roles. And he serves currently as a middle judicatory executive in the Church of the Brethren. Marcia's vocational, spiritual, and family experiences have shaped her vision and passion for faithful stewardship ministry that recognizes and celebrates the diversity of Christ's Church and the common call to all disciples to the sacred place of stewardship. And let me just add that I have known Marcia for many, many years now. I am pleased that I serve on a gathering with Marcia where various other denominational foundation executives are able to gather together, share stories, compare notes, and bring all of the best practices that are being done in all different parts of Christ Church back to our own denomination. And Marcia does a fantastic job of handling all of that and everything that she does at the Ecumenical Stewardship Center. And so, as many of you know out there, there is the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, and they do great work, and I would urge you to take a look at their website at tens.org. The Ecumenical Stewardship Center is yet again another fantastic resource with great services as well as downloadable resources that you can put to work immediately in your congregation. And so without further ado, I will turn the table directly towards Marcia Shelter, and you will stop having to look at my face for the rest of this webinar. Thank you, Marcia.
Well, thank you, Jim, for that very kind introduction. It's a joy to be with you today and friends from the Episcopal Church and others as well. And we are grateful for the partnership of the Episcopal Church in Ecumenical Stewardship Center's mission and ministry. It's one of 19 denominations in the U.S. and Canada that are partners, as well as associate partners, of which the Episcopal Network for Stewardship is a part. So we're delighted for the opportunity, and I'm personally grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit with you some of the things that I've learned along the way, and am happy to share with you and help share how they frame the Ecumenical Stewardship Center's mission and ministry, and how they might help you share yours in your congregation or organization. So as we get started, I'd like you to just take a moment and envision your journey to one of your favorite places, whether that be driving in a car or walking a peaceful path in woods in a city. Wherever that is, I'm sure that you like to stay focused in that favorite place or favorite journey. And that's wonderful, but when you think about not only that immediate focus, but that expansive focus, that's probably something you do too. You want to take in all of the scenery. Well, sometimes in the church, our focus gets too narrow, and we go on the journey kind of like a horse pulling a buggy with blinders on, and we're not always attentive to what's happening in the world around us. So today I want us to remove those blinders, if you will, and take a more expansive view as to what's happening with generosity in the world around us that really does impact our missions in our congregations or organizations, which really are us, because we're both. We're the church and we're other places as well. So let's take a look at a bit of that. Let's first look at the big picture of philanthropy in the United States. These statistics come from the National Philanthropic Trust. As you see, it takes a little while to compile research. I think 2016 statistics may be out, but if they have been, it's not long. But these statistics are still very true, and there wouldn't be major shifts in another year. As you can see, in 2015, Americans gave almost $400 billion to charity, and that was up, an increase from 2014. So we see, in some ways, maybe the bad years of the end of the 2000s are behind us a bit, and philanthropy is trending up. And what has been true for decades, the largest percentage of gifts were made to religious causes. Here you see the breakdown for religion and other general philanthropic areas that are categorized: education, human services, grant-making foundations, and health, to hospitals or other health-related organizations. So the good news is religion still receives a large percentage of the total gifts. However, the not as good news is that that trend has been going down for the past several decades. What was 41% in 1995, now in 2014 is down to 33%. So gifts to religion are decreasing. The flip side of that is the number of charitable organizations in the United States is increasing. 1.5 million charitable organizations. We're not to the place where, like babies, they're born every second, but it seems like there are more and more charitable organizations all the time. And of this 1.5 million, only about 300,000 are congregations. So that also is a decreasing piece of that philanthropic pie. So we realize that there are differences in groups that receive the dollars. Where do they come from? Well, individuals is still the largest group of givers, but we also have bequests, foundations, and corporations. Now, of course, bequests normally come from individuals as well, and you see those two together represent 80% of the charitable dollars. But foundations and corporations also play a part with the other 20%. So it is not just individuals, it's also organizations that contribute to this philanthropic pie. But let's think a little bit more about the individuals, and especially how their characteristics might influence what happens in church giving. If you heard of Strauss and Howe, S-T-R-A-U-S-S and H-O-W-E, these two gentlemen have done a lot of research on generations. They believe that generations actually cycle, and that generations, newer generations actually have characteristics of generations maybe 4 or 5 back. Their research shows some of these characteristics of the different generations that are alive today. Now, we don't have the newest generation on here, the millennials, and when you look at the dates of the millennials, you'll see we think them as the younger ones, but they're getting older as well, and we'll soon need to add in this newest generation of givers. But you can see here how some of the characteristics might play into church giving. For example, with boomers, money is to be spent. Well, perhaps the shadow side of their reluctance to give may be they're in debt. They're in major debt, and they're not giving because of that, and they don't want to talk about it. For millennials, they have such a strong tie to relationships, so it's more challenging to talk to them in terms of giving to an organization. They're focused on relationships. We certainly don't want to stereotype. In my own family, I have 2 children. One was born in 1978 and one was born in 1981. And as you can see from the chart there, they straddle that net generation or Generation X and millennials. And it's been fascinating to me how much they bear the characteristics of their generation when they're only 3 years apart. So while we don't want to stereotype, we can still take these characteristics and think about them and say, well, how does that play into the people in our church, and how might it affect their giving? So as Jim mentioned, I received my master's from St. Mary's University of Minnesota in Winona, Minnesota. And in my master's research, I studied annual giving. And I developed 6 specific characteristics about giving trends that I think are still very prevalent today and really do influence giving, not only within the church but outside. And so what can we learn from these 6 trends? how can we think about the questions related to these trends, and are there things that we can do in church giving that are influenced by these trends and can help us do a better job in encouraging faithful generosity in our congregations. So here are the 6: donor-driven, relationship-focused, choice-abundant, boundary-bereft, time-transcendent, and information-rich. So let's take a little closer look at these. Donor-driven, defined by generational characteristics, and we already talked about this a bit, but think about the difference of how you might approach a millennial who is focused on relationships as opposed to someone from the builder generation who really is focused on institutional giving, or that is something that they're familiar with and comfortable with. It's going to be a completely different conversation. So we need to be attentive to the different generational characteristics. Relationship focused, and we'll talk about this a little more in depth, but no matter the generation, relationships play into the conversation. Choice abundant, we talked about the 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the US. So there are literally millions of choices where people can give. Boundary bereft. Again, gifts come from a variety of sources. While individuals still carry the majority of that, there are others who are part of this, as well as how gifts are given. So we need to think about that. In the case of organizations and companies, I think this is a place where we see this trend really developing and becoming more prevalent. Think about your own choices in related to your consumer purchases. Have you ever made a purchase from a company based on that company's values? Have you set up an Amazon Smile with donations to a particular organization? Companies are realizing the value that they can gain by purporting their own specific values or values that you might appreciate. So that plays into the boundary bereft, where we see a little more porous interaction between nonprofit and for-profit companies as they work to their own particular advantages. Time transcendent, ways to give are available 24/7, 365. It's no longer passing the plate on Sunday mornings or writing a check, waiting for that check to clear. Online giving is growing all the time. There are always ways to give. Information rich, mission and transparency are essential. Communication about your mission is not an option. It is essential, it is important, as well as transparency. This is what people are looking for in their giving. The case statement is more important than ever, not only for nonprofits outside the religious specter, but also within. So we've kind of looked at the big picture now. Let's turn our focus back to the church specifically. What can you do to make your giving invitations, the process, making the case for faithful generosity more effective in your congregation? Well, first of all, is your message meaningful to different generations, or is it just kind of a one and done? Very general, very generic. That's a question you should ask. How are we doing in relating to the different generations in our congregation? Relationship focused. Are your members encouraged to leverage their relationships to support your mission and ministry, and do they know how? This is a major difference between nonprofits and churches oftentimes. If you have been on a nonprofit board, or if you have provided leadership in a nonprofit organization other than a church, then you have probably been asked, or there has been the expectation that not only will you give to that organization, but you will invite others to do so. And they will be asking you, who do you know that would be interested in giving to this organization? That doesn't happen, I don't think, too often in congregations. We focus with who's in the room, who are members, who are folks that are involved in our congregations, whereas we don't think about who might be interested in our mission and ministry and who might be willing to give to that. That's an important piece, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. Choice abundant. Are your invitations to give truly inviting? How are you making a case for supporting your ministry that stands out with that 1.5 million nonprofits? And I'm sure you can understand that your members of your churches are giving to other organizations as well. So the competition is there, whether we want to think about it or not. The competition is there, not in a negative way, but just to say it behooves us all the more to make sure that our understanding of our mission and ministry is clear, so that people will be excited about supporting it. Boundary bereft, besides the idea of how for-profits and nonprofits are both contributing to giving or asking for gifts, do you have opportunities to give beyond the Sunday morning offering plate? And have you considered partnering with other entities for support? And this kind of builds on the last point of choice abundant. Are there nonprofits or other organizations in your community that would have affinity with your ministry and mission? And could they be approached for support? One example in my area is that we discovered there is a foundation whose primary purpose is to give money to churches for renovation of their buildings. So we know of several churches that have taken advantage of that. Are you aware of what is out there that you might be able to tap for support for your ministry? Time transcendent, again, what 24/7, 365 opportunities do you provide beyond the Sunday morning offering plate? And information rich. Do your members know that their gifts are making a difference? Do you thank them? Do you have minutes for mission? When you send thank yous, what's in that envelope? Not only thank you, but is it specific? With your gift, we were able to do this. Your gift helped do that. How are you bringing your mission and ministry to life on a 24/7, 365 basis that makes people excited and encouraged and happy to be a part of your mission and ministry? So those are some questions that you can think about, your leadership can think about, your stewardship team, as you're looking at the big picture of how you are encouraging faithful generosity in your congregation. Here is a really brief to-do list of some starting points that you may want to focus on. Again, create generationally focused giving opportunities. Are there ways that you can target different groups? And not only target them, but maybe give them or think about things that they particularly would be interested in supporting. Relationship focused, engage more persons in your congregational stewardship activities. Are there ways that you can equip your folks to be advocates for you in your mission and ministry with people that they know? Not all of the messages have to come from the pastor, or should they? There are others who can be involved in inviting persons to give. Choice abundant. Develop or revisit your church's mission statement. What in there is exciting, appealing, that folks would say, this is a great mission and ministry. We really want to be a part of it. We want to support it with our gifts, with volunteering, with our time, with our talents. An exciting mission and ministry statement will go a long way towards helping develop a case for support. Jim mentioned this, create a process for promoting and receiving legacy gifts. And after I wrote that, I said, oh, really? Those should be reversed. Create a process for receiving and promoting legacy gifts. And the reason I say that is sometimes churches will start promoting and asking for legacy gifts, and they come and then they say, oh my goodness, now what are we going to do with these? We really didn't have a process in place to do a good job in accepting these gifts. What if a gift comes that is too narrowly defined? What if a gift comes that doesn't match our mission and ministry? So have the plans in place first, and turn to Jim to help you with that, and he has his hand raised. So
yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I mean, anyone who's listening, as I mentioned before, ECF can help you put in place that structure for receiving those legacy gifts, their endowment gift acceptance policy. So if you're an Episcopal parish, ECF is more than happy for free to help you put that endowment and gift acceptance structure in place, just as Marcia is saying. If you need help investing those funds, we can also help you do that. But just wanted to make sure you did know that key part, that we can help you with exactly what Marcia's talking about. Sorry, Marcia, you're back on.
Oh, that's fine.
Questions. I'll jump in with some questions in a minute, too.
Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. If I had more time, I would tell you about a stained glass window at the seminary where I used to work and how we labored to make that gift work. So it is important to have those plans in place. Time transcendent, again, provide giving opportunities beyond the offering plate. There are many easy ways now for that to happen. So please look into those and make that happen for your congregation. There are still ways, too, that you can make the offering time in worship meaningful and include those that give online. So as you provide those opportunities beyond the offering plate, make sure you think about that, too, that you still have a meaningful offering time in worship for those who choose to give online. And finally, information rich. Again, develop a communications plan that lets members know their gifts really do make a difference. When you thank them, make sure that that is part of it. If you are sending out statements without a thank you, that is your first place to start. Include thank yous with their statements of giving. And one communications rule of thumb is that for a message to sink in, you need to give it 7 times in 7 different ways. So it's not hard to under-communicate, and it's pretty easy to not communicate enough. So don't be afraid to really dig into a good communications plan with thank yous and letting members know that their gifts make a difference. As Jim mentioned, ESC has resources. Many of them are similar to what the Episcopal Church provides. So this is in no way meant to be a competition commercial, but I'm happy for the opportunity to share a bit what is available from ESC. Our Giving magazine, theme materials, and companion resource provide an easy-to-use annual stewardship emphasis. There are 19 different biblically based themes available. The magazine has been published for 19 years, and each one includes a different stewardship emphasis that is timeless, and so we keep them live. And you can go to our website. The URL at the bottom of this slide shows exactly where that is if you'd like to peruse those materials. We now are offering all of our magazines and theme materials in digital format as well. So if you want to save some paper and a tree, you can do that with our resources. We also offer some events that can help you learn more about spiritual and practical dimensions of stewardship and generosity. Our Generosity Next event explores current stewardship topics and their impact on the church. And our other event looks at a lot of the practical sides of giving, as well as some good spiritual and theological material as well. For the one that's coming up in 2018 in Dallas, I am happy to mention that there are 6 of ESC's denominational partners specifically partnering on this event, and the Episcopal Church is one of those through TENS. So delighted about that, and maybe I will see you in Dallas, if not before, and encourage you to look into attending one of our events. We also have online courses, and these are listed here. They can especially help you become a more competent steward leader. What is stewardship all about anyway? These 6 courses give you some insights into that. Kind of like the lovely graphic, the different dimensions of stewardship. So again, there's the URL, and you can check into those, and you can participate in an online course from where you live right at home. One of our newest initiatives is our Compass initiative, especially for young adults, but anyone is welcome to participate in these components of the initiative. Our social media pages and our live chats. Our live chats is something new for us, and every month we invite an expert in a topic related to faith and finances to join us. We're also recording them and building a library, so you can check those out on the Compass section of the Ecumenical Stewardship Center website. We also offer capital campaign consulting services, as does ECF. So again, just mention those and give you the URL for those. I should say too that we always, when we receive inquiries about the Capital Campaign Network, we always check and see, have you talked to your denomination first to make sure that they have reached out to the resources closest to them when it comes to capital campaigns. Jim, I think we're to the Q&A portion.
Sorry, my unmute was not coming off as easily. So I invite everyone who is online to please type in any questions that you might have. And I know you have more to talk about, but I know you wanted to pause here for a bit, Marcia. But what would you say is the best starting point for many parishes? The good news is that it's May, right? So many parishes struggle with stewardship on an ongoing basis. many times because there are so few volunteers. So I am curious. There are some questions coming in right now that I will ask you, but
Right.
from your perspective, Marcia, where do you think is the best place for a small parish that may be struggling with stewardship, and how just to get started? Where's the best place for them to start, in your opinion?
I think the very first place to start is to celebrate what you have. You can look into asset-based planning. If you Google that, you will probably find some resources around that. An asset-based planning process helps you focus on what you have, what God has given you, and not in what you feel is a deficit. So that's a good way to start your mindset, is to say, what do we have that we really can share with our community? That's another mindset piece that I would say. As you've heard me say the last 30-some minutes, you've heard mission and ministry over and over again. That's because another mindset piece you need to have is we are called to mission and ministry. And whether you have 6 people in your church or 6,000 people in your church, you are still called to ministry. And where you are is a unique place in that big ministry spectrum that God has out there. But there are things that you can do. An anecdote about that is a very small congregation that I know of through my husband's ministry, which you mentioned. The Church of the Brethren is a small denomination. A mega church for us is 500 people. So we're talking small churches here. And
it's pretty big for an Episcopal church, too.
Okay, well then we understand each other. A congregation of about 20 people was really struggling with this. And when they began to think about what they had, they realized they had a preschool meeting in their building as an income stream to help them get through, but they weren't having much interaction with the people in the preschool.
Right.
So they said, wow, how can we increase this mission and ministry? And they realized that they should have more interaction with them, and not interaction to say, we want to have an interaction with you to make sure that you come on Sunday mornings.
Right.
An interaction to say, this is our mission and ministry, and we want to have more relationship with you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start that mindset, that helps then in the planning that you do afterward. Instead of saying, we only have 3 people to work on this, you can say, we have 3 committed people to work on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can maybe let go of some of that baggage, that more negative baggage, and say, what can we do in the context that we are right now?
Okay.
I will mention one resource that the Ecumenical Stewardship Center has.
That was my follow-up question.
Okay. And if you received my email today, this resource was mentioned. It's called Stewardship in the Small Membership Congregation. It's by Clark Hargis, who's from the Christian Church Disciples. It's a digital resource that we have online. It used to be called the Rural Small Membership Congregation, but in a redo, we took that rural word out because we realized that's not the only place where we have small congregations these days. But there's some really easy to apply pieces in there that a small stewardship group can do. Some good ideas about applications. There's an easy to use stewardship plan in there, Bible studies, a place to start. And in general, again, I think one of the best things you can do is just unburden yourself with some of that baggage to say, maybe we can't do things like we used to. but maybe that's not where God is calling us now, and that is okay.
And that's a really good place to start. There are a couple of questions I'm also going to pose right now, but just to wrap up this section, because I think that's where so many parishes struggle, is just getting started. And I think that's helpful to have them reflect on the most positive aspects, right? And reflect on what are the things they have. Actually, that's very biblical, if I'm not mistaken, within the New Testament, about looking at the gifts which exist currently and then making a decision about how to move ahead. And I think all of that is really helpful, Marcia. And just for those who are listening, we will share the resource that Marcia has specified. So Marcia, maybe you'll send that to me one more time. There's the first question that we have, Marcia, for you now is, do you have any specific ideas for appealing to young families with children? This is quite honestly something we would like to have more of a problem with in the Episcopal Church, as many of our parishes tend to be much older and not having children. But there are parishes, I was at one in Oklahoma just this weekend, where there were a great number of wonderful young families and children. How do you, what are some specific, can-do things that parishes can do to appeal to young families with children with respect to encouraging giving and stewardship?
Very good question. One is to make sure that somehow in your stewardship education, from the littlest on up, that there's something at some point that relates to that. You can check your curriculum and see if somewhere along the way it's included. I was delighted to see in the curriculum that we're using in our church, which is called SHINE, S-H-I-N-E, specifically for Anabaptist denominations, but anybody can use it. For about 4 weeks or so, there really was an emphasis on stewardship, so I was delighted to see that. So make sure that somewhere in the Christian Ed curriculum that's mentioned. Secondly, you can think about ways that families can participate. Are there certain ways that families can participate in the offering? We have an offering in our congregation every fifth Sunday, especially for our local food bank. And for that, the plate is not passed. We have a place in the front of the sanctuary where people can make contributions, and it's a very much an intergenerational time. So are there ways that you can bring intergenerational activity into the ways that you collect the offering? Thirdly, from an appeal standpoint, again, this most of the time is going to be a generation that's focused on relationships and impact. Are you, in your mission and ministry, in your strategic plan, in your case statement, whatever you want to call it, are there pieces that you can pull out that will really speak to these people? And just an example, a common one, but yet still for some people, and pardon the pun, it turns the light on for them. Your building and your electric expenses, those kind of material expenses, are you translating them into your mission and ministry?
Very, very important. We talk about that a lot in mission-based budgeting, so that it's clear that you're demonstrating that all of that operating expense, right, that's just looked on as overhead, that actually is what empowers and enables mission. It isn't simply just those boring items that you just have to have.
Exactly. So, how much of the time was put into children's programming, your Wednesday night, or other things that you're doing with families. And yes, God bless you, that's a great problem to have. In our resources, we try to include an article every time about education for children. Our companion resource includes children's stories for worship and youth Bible studies. So we do have some pieces there, and I'll give a sneak peek that we're working on getting some resources from one of our denominational partners who's no longer publishing, that we're working on getting the rights to, especially for children.
Okay.
So I hope in the next few months to be able to roll that out publicly.
Great. I have a couple other questions. One, I'll try and answer offline for Thomas Connolly. But the second question I will pose to you. So, online giving, it's growing fast. I see the statistics, you do too. I would actually personally like to do much more online giving, but when it comes to the church wants that check. They have that desire to do that old school, and unfortunately, it's becoming anachronistic. The church may be the only place where people under 40 still write a check.
That's exactly right.
So here is a question: how to engage those who give online during the offertory? Now, to just explain a little bit more, many people give online through a variety of ways. There are things which the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, or TENS, is now making available through its website for doing online giving. However, what does one do within the context of the offertory, where there is the collection being taken, and then, of course, in the Episcopal context, you typically have a grand entrance of the bread and the wine being taken to the altar along with the donations of the congregation, and it's a very fertile place to demonstrate that connection between that giving of oneself and sharing in the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. So all of that rich theology, all engaged at that time. But for those giving online, how are they engaging with it? I have some ideas, but I'll first give you, time to say a few things, Marcia, and how you think folks who have given online can be engaged in the collection, in the offertory process.
Great, and I'd love to hear your ideas, Jim. I'll share a couple. One, I completely agree with you that the offering time in worship is really important, and there could be vast improvements even in that, setting aside the online piece. And some denominations pull that off better than others, and it sounds like in the Episcopal Church, you certainly have an element of reverence around that, which is really nice to hear. And I personally don't think that it's something that should be done away with out of convenience, culture, trends, or whatever. I think claiming and naming this portion of our spiritual discipline in the worship service is really important. But I do think there are ways that it can be named. Interestingly, my congregation just last week began to announce that they have online giving ready to go. So it'll be interesting to see as a congregational participant how they handle that. But it can be, one simple way is when you give thanks, remember to thank the gifts that came in online.
To do it verbally.
Yes, to do it verbally.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we also are trying to be good stewards about resources, but some congregations have devised little cards that can be put in the offering as some kind of, physical symbol to demonstrate for those who love to give online but yet feel awkward when the plate comes past. In your own context, think about what might be comfortable. Maybe include more personal testimonies. Have folks who give online, as well as those who give during worship, talk about why they give. That goes back to that relational piece that's so important, as well as just the opportunity to underscore the importance of the spiritual discipline. So those would be a couple of things I would suggest, Jim.
Well, the idea you had with putting something physically in the plate as it's being passed is certainly exactly what I would recommend. There's different ways you could do it. I mean, people could literally, if you're still giving envelopes, put their envelope in, but write on the envelope, I gave online.
Mm-hmm.
so that they are once again participating in the action of the offertory, as well as your idea about putting in a card. Many times you can take a laminated card which says I gave online, and that's what you're putting in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again, it's a symbolic thing, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
symbols for Episcopalians are deeply important. And so that is just one more way to demonstrate that you are a part of that action that's taking place at the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question, and here it is from Chuck Jones. I'm a clergy in charge of stewardship and have a big challenge getting people to volunteer for my stewardship committee. Yes. Any idea on how to make volunteering as a stewardship leader more appealing?
First, I would suggest thinking about the task. And this is maybe a bit of a bigger answer to the question. And I thank my colleague, Bruce Barkhauer from the Christian Church Disciples, for this idea. He says there really should be maybe 3 committees in a church. And I know, we're just talking about smaller churches, and oh my gosh, now there's 3 committees. But it's about definition of tasks so that we're really focusing on one task and there's not overlap in understanding. That there should be a stewardship committee that focuses on what we do with the resources after they get here. But it should be a different committee that focuses on explaining and obtaining the resources. To me, that second committee is the one, if you have to keep it to 2, that should be charged with developing a stewardship campaign. Because what happens sometimes is the tug of war that goes on between, well, we have this many resources, and so we don't want to be extravagant with our developing our stewardship committee. And it's just those mindsets tend to conflict each other. So if you have a committee that's just tasked with developing the campaign, working on getting the resources you need for mission and ministry, apart from the other management piece, you might have more, it might be easier for you to find people who are suited to both of those tasks because they really are different. Talking about set time frames too, again, a positive attitude, focusing, this is on mission and ministry. It's not about trying to get money to meet the budget. I mean, that's a critical mindset communications piece. We're not just trying to get money to meet the budget. We're supporting our mission and ministry.
And focusing too much on the money is probably what's turning people off.
Mm-hmm.
Because then that's making people think that that's the only part of what they're going to be involved in, and people don't want to be a bill collector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hope that helps.
What do you think? Let me try and expand a little bit more on it. Many times in the Episcopal Church for many years, we've talked about time, talent, and treasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
T's. And what do you think that incorporating all aspects of volunteering and sharing of one's time, one's abilities, and what they can share, do you find churches in different denominations outside of our own Episcopal experience, do you find places which combine all of those together onto a similar committee, making similar decisions for, let's say, for example, putting together a much larger pledge document, right? Where the pledge document maybe on one side is about your financial commitment, on the other side is your commitment of time and talent and some of the ministries in which you'd be involved. Do you find that is more effective, and that may indirectly, address some of this issue of making being on that committee more appealing?
Well, it certainly is a more holistic view of what stewardship is. And so to communicate that to your congregation, you're well served to do that anyway. That stewardship is much more than raising the dollars to meet your mission and ministry's needs. That is very important. To me, there are three pillars or principles relating to stewardship that a congregation should address.
Okay.
First is, stewardship is a spiritual discipline. Stewardship is about managing what God has entrusted to us. It's a part of what we do as Christian disciples. So we need to have that conversation. Secondly, generosity certainly is part of that. How we give is absolutely a part of that idea of stewardship, and that includes talent and treasure, as you said. And thirdly, the reason for all of this is not about us. It's about mission and ministry. It's about the outcomes. So if a church is missing any of those, if it's only focusing on raising funds for mission and ministry, if it's only focusing on all the aspects of stewardship, but yet is afraid to ask for the funds for mission and ministry, or if there's nothing being said about the outcomes, it's like a three-legged stool where one or two legs are missing. And so maybe that's another place, another good starting place. Are you having those three conversations? Are they evident in your mission and ministry? Are your committees focusing on them? Is your leadership focusing on those three principles when you're thinking about stewardship?
And if I can just underline one, because we're coming to the close of our evening tonight. And of course, if anyone has any final questions, please do type them into chat or the Q&A right now. Impact is such an important word. I mean, we talk about that all the time here at the Episcopal Church Foundation, and I talk about it when I'm encouraging folks to, consider making a significant major gift or a planned gift or towards endowment. Whenever you're talking about any of these types, you need to talk about impact and what the difference your giving is making. And I think that is probably one of the stools that ends up being pretty wobbly for us in the Episcopal Church, even though we don't like to ask for money either. Talking about the impact, the difference that your giving is making, incorporating things in Eucharist, where like during the announcement time, having a ministry minute where you talk about a ministry and its impact, its difference, taking the time at an annual meeting at your Episcopal Church for being able to talk about what is the difference that the endowment income is having, how having an endowment is making a difference in the lives of the people of the parish and outside of the parish, taking those opportunities. It is just so important to show that impact because it all links in together. When people witness that they're seeing a difference, they're more willing to support it, even if they may, in endowed parishes, which I deal with many times, may think, oh, they don't need the money, they have an endowment. Well, if you believe in the mission and ministry of the congregation and what it's doing, the reason you believe in it is typically you're either directly involved in the mission and ministry, and as we all know in fundraising and in stewardship, those who are the most involved are the biggest givers. It's not a determination of wealth or income. It's if you're tied in to the mission and ministry of a congregation, those folks are the ones that give the largest gift because it is a part of their life. They are, incorporated. It's incarnate for them. What the difference is. So, and there are going to be people that won't be as involved, but still want to see the difference that a particular ministry is having. So, Marcia, you have the last word as we wrap up tonight.
Well, just to say thank you again for the opportunity. It's been wonderful to share these ideas with you. And the good news is that this recording will be available and you can access it again and again to look at these starting points ideas to help you with your stewardship ministry. Visit our website if you'd like to receive our monthly e-newsletter. There's a place you can sign up for that. And wish you all the very, very best as you continue to discover God's call for you in your particular ministry context.
Thank you, Marcia. If you could switch to the next couple of slides, I just want to wrap us up for tonight.
Sure.
So all of you out there, as Marcia has already alluded to, we have all of these webinars recorded, and they're available to you 24 hours a day. So if you're having trouble sleeping, you could always listen to one of mine, not to Marcia's, but listen to one of mine on planned giving or endowments. If you go to the next slide and the next slide after that. So all of us here at ECF, and this is just showing my staff here in our financial resource area, we're all here to help and support you in a variety of areas. And we'll be sharing a couple of links from our Vital Practices website in addition to Marcia's links and other resources. But we're here to support your efforts in your parish. And ECF is here to build up the leadership and financial resources of various Episcopal institutions, and especially Episcopal congregations all throughout the country. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And an incredible thank you to Marcia for sharing all of your broad knowledge. You deal with a number of different denominations. And although we in the Episcopal Church always think we're the best and we know it all, it's always good for us to reach out and hear a whole variety of perspectives. So thank you all for coming tonight. I wish you God's blessing and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks.